When is it time to quit playing gigs? The brutal truth every musician faces. There comes a time when your hands say yes, but your body says, sit down, Grandpa. With Pearl Jam's drummers Matt Cameron and Ozzy Osbourne's recent final show, they're stepping down. It got me thinking, when does a musician know it's time to walk away from the gig? Because let me tell you, I once saw a guy find out the hard way on stage in front of a paying crowd with nothing but a duffel bag of vodka and broken dreams to keep him company. Here's the brutal truth. Music is the fountain of youth until your knees remind you you're not 25 anymore. There's a fine line between being a legend and being a liability. Now look, if you're a huge star like Ozzy Osbourne, you get to pick your shots. You get to, I'm going to do one final show and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do two, 20-minute sets. And then I'm going to have every legend in the world get up on stage and play before me. Most of us are average Joes, just like myself, right? And we have to determine when it is our time to step down, right? So it's something to think about, right? Now, I could go play gigs now. I'd say I'm probably a better player now than I was when I was 19. Because I'm much smarter now. I know what to play. I know how to get tones. So I'm better than I was at 25. But physically getting through a 4-hour set and what it does to my body the next day, and I know a lot of people will let me know in the comments how they feel the next day after they do a gig, or maybe they do a double gig. It gets harder and harder to do as you get older. Now, Matt Cameron from Pearl Jam, he played with Pearl Jam for 27 years. That's longer than most marriages and probably just as hard on the joints. Now, look, being a drummer is an extremely difficult, physically difficult job, right? And playing with a group that tours is a very trying and difficult situation, right? The travel takes an extreme toll on your body. Yes, if you're with a big name group, it's going to be easier because you're going to have roadies, you're going to have techs, you're going to have these things. You might get nicer hotel rooms, nicer travel accommodations, depending on the level of group you're with. But man, being a drummer is a tough gig. Imagine playing 2-hour, 3-hour shows every night, and 3 hours in an arena act, you're going at a pretty high level the entire show. Yes, there might be a few slow songs. There might be a point where the guitar player plays a solo, or maybe the vocalist does an acoustic bit, but man, that's an extremely hard toll. So at some point, your wrist can't handle even flow at 140 beats per minute for 3 hours straight. That's the reality, and that's why guys step down. That's why now Guns N' Roses is now on their second reunion tour drummer. They've got a young guy in there now, seemingly full of piss and vinegar, and he's in the engine room. Being a drummer, I call it the engine room of a band, or you're the guy driving the bus. You're actually driving the show and guiding it. That's a tough thing to do when you're, getting on up in age. Now, when time isn't on your side, you think it's about staying in shape, but your body has an expiration date like milk, only it doesn't smell bad until it's too late. And that's the reality, man. One day you wake up and realize, man, I'm struggling up here. Look at Nico McBrain from Iron Maiden. He had to step down, and legendary drummer, incredible drummer, but having some health problems, right? And then coming back from that and getting behind the kit and then realizing there were certain songs that he was unable to perform. And man, it's a tough thing, man, leaving a huge group like that, or even just leaving your local blues band that you play with. All of a sudden you're home on a Saturday night. Now, if there's any guys out there that have retired, let me know what it's like, man. It's been an interesting journey coming down here to Florida and not having gigs on the calendars. I set my own work schedule now. I'm highly motivated. So I'm here on YouTube, and every Saturday night I do a gig here on YouTube with Backstage with Bad Brad. I do a live event. I answer questions, and talk about gear. We talk about music, and that's my way of kind of filling that Saturday night void. But man, it's a difficult thing when all of a sudden you're not out there doing it. It's one thing to age out of TikTok trends. It's another to age out of your own gig. Now, I want to tell a story, right? I'll say legacy drummer story, right? There was a group that I played with that was an older group, right? I don't need to blast anybody in this story, but this guy had played with this group in the 60s, right? He was a drummer, right? And a damn good one. And, but the 60s and the time when I was playing this gig, I was probably playing this gig, I'm just guessing, this was probably around 2007 or so, maybe 2006. That's a long period of time, all right? Well, we had been using a couple of different drummers on this gig, depending on who was available. And we had a gig in Tulsa, Oklahoma booked. And this gig, this guy who had played with the group in the 60s, lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? So he had stayed in touch with the lead singer and said, hey, man, I'd love to play with you guys and, yada, yada, yada. So it worked out that all of a sudden this guy I kept hearing about how great this guy is. All of a sudden, he's going to fill in on this one gig at this casino gig in his hometown, right? Tulsa, Oklahoma, living on Tulsa time. Now, we had gone, I believe, the night before and gone and seen this guy. And I think we ended up not seeing him that night. He wasn't there. It was some local jam or something he was supposed to be playing at, because me and the bass player, we wanted to know, can this guy still do it? I mean, that's a long time to go from the 60s to now, right? And here's the deal, man. 60s music, some of that rock, early rock and pop, rock type stuff, it's very up-tempo. I mean, look, man, it was one of the toughest gigs I ever did, was playing with the 60s legacy act, because there's tons of chord changes. There were all these little parts that I had to play perfectly each night. And if you made one little mistake, it would be glaringly obvious. So you had to be on your toes. You had to be ready. And here's the deal. The singer liked things up tempo. He didn't want to have to be dragging through a song. He wanted to get the songs done. It was very much a mercenary type performance. And so here we are. We're going to bring this guy 30 years later. They bring him back. And he walks in with a duffel bag and his girlfriend, right? And we figured the duffel bag would have his sticks and his gear. No, he had a half-gallon of vodka and maybe a dream or two in that. And he proceeds to tell us that he's been out in the parking lot tailgating. So here's the deal. If I'd have known, if they called me tomorrow and said, we're coming to Florida and we want you to play guitar, I would spend a week, 2 weeks playing through the tunes, playing them each day, getting, walking each day, doing everything I needed to be physically able to play the gigs. But this guy thought he could just get up and his muscle memory would kick in. But as it turned out, muscle memory requires muscles that still work. And we got up there and we knew immediately within the first song, because the first song was an up-tempo, here we are, and man, it was a train wreck, and the singer was sweating profusely and angrily motioning him to pick up the tempos, and there's no way this guy could pick up and play those parts. These were, seemingly, if you listen to this material, you would think these are easy songs, but it's not easy to keep the tempos up. And dude, it was one of the most brutal sets we had ever played. It was absolutely a nightmare, and the singer was so pissed. But the reality is, only person he had to be pissed at was himself, because ultimately it was his choice to use his old buddy. But man, it was literally a nightmare, but we had to just keep plowing through the songs, and this guy was just failing at every beat, failing at every turn, not hitting anything. It would have been almost better if we'd have in fact, it would have been better if we'd have had no drummer and just gone out there and played with guitar, bass, drums, and keyboards and lead vocals, because we would have at least been able to keep the tempo of the songs. We had been doing it. Here's the thing. When you stop doing something, man, you definitely lose something. If you don't use it, you lose it. And here's this guy with a duffel bag filled with a half-gallon of vodka who's half in the bag before the gig even starts. Meanwhile, here we're coming in. We're trained assassins. We're completely stone cold sober and ready for a show that runs like clockwork. And he was so far removed from that world that he just wasn't able to come back. Now, the lessons from that story: respect your limitations, because no one wants to watch you murder your own legacy on stage. If you're known for your playing, make sure you're not remembered for falling off the stool mid-song. Now, he didn't fall off the stool mid-song, but he might as well have, because his playing, it was like non-existent. We were playing in one zone, in one tempo, and he was down here in another, just flailing away. It was brutal. And here's the deal, man. The drummer drives the bus, but he was unable to drive the bus. So we all had to just plow on with our show, deal with the angry lead singer who's getting more and more frustrated and more aggravated. And it just is what it is. We got through it as best we could. And that guy never got the call again. Probably ruined a friendship over trying to think that he could all of a sudden show up 30 years later and do the job without any prep. When it's time to step down, when you can't keep time, it's time to keep off the stage. Your skills are like milk. Your reputation is like cheese. Know when it's time to leave before you curdle. So here's the deal. Time catches up to us all. You can either step down with dignity or get dragged off stage by security while clutching your vodka bottle and wondering why your sticks feel so heavy. And while that didn't happen in our particular case, it might as well have, because in the end, the gig ends for everyone. It's just better if you get to call your own encore.